Okay, so we have now covered at this point then the production possibilities frontiers and the general areas that they have. So now what we want to do is I want to demonstrate to you the idea that free trade benefits all. And by that statement, what economists mean is that you're actually able to consume outside of a country's production possibilities frontier. So free trade benefits all doesn't mean that no one loses their job because of free trade. Certainly people do. But the society as a whole is able to consume outside of its frontier. And so the general idea would be something like the following. That it can have two countries. Where country 1 could have 30x and 30y, and that country 2 could have 30x and 60. Sorry, this should be a y. So then the question is how could, in these cases, each country consume outside of their frontier? Well, the way that we set this up is we actually need to determine their in this case, their comparative advantage. Now, a comparative advantage means that a country can produce the good at the lowest opportunity cost. Absolute advantage would just refer to where its intercept is. So in this case, country 2 has an absolute advantage in the production of good Y. But in terms of the comparative advantage, which is much more important, the question is which one can produce the good at the lowest opportunity cost. To find that, the easiest thing to do is just take the two intercepts and set them equal to each other. So not necessarily equal to each other, but in terms of each other. So now when I reduce this, I have 1y can be traded off for 1x. That's essentially saying what the slope is of that frontier. In this case, 2y trades for 1x, which is again now the slope of this. Now, it's helpful then to then reduce this down so that it's 1y in terms of 1/2 x. I divided each side by 2. So now I'm comparing 1y, 1x, 1x, 1y to this. So then the question is who can produce y at the cheapest price? 1y costs half an x, 1y costs 1x. Country 2 has a comparative advantage in good y. They produce y at the cheapest price. Only cost them half an x. Over here, right, we could see that it would have cost them 1x. Now what about 1x? Who has the comparative advantage in x? 1x costs 2y, 1x costs 1y. Country 1 actually has the comparative advantage in good x. Now that's going to be useful for us because then what we're going to say is that countries are then going to specialize in what they have the comparative advantage in. Okay, so when we look at this, as we look at sort of a sample problem that we can do with this, let's set up a situation where if I just write out the points along the frontier, right, for country number 1 again, it would have, these would be all the points on the frontier, or at least some of them. Whereas for country number 2, it would look like the following. So now what we know is that country 1 was specializing in the production of good X. So they're going to initially produce right here. Country 2, if we remember, had the comparative advantage in good Y. They're going to produce right here. Right, they're going to produce all Y. And now they're going to trade with each other. The terms of trade actually have to lie in between the two opportunity costs. So in this case, 1x must trade sorry, I'm just writing this out here. So, 1x has to trade between 1y and 2y. That was the range of the comparative advantages. 1y has to trade between half an x and an x. The question is, why does it have to be in that range? Well, if it wasn't in that range, then the countries would not willingly engage in trade, because they could simply do it better themselves. So now what we've done here is we've calculated the comparative advantage and calculated the possible terms of trade. I'm going to stop the video here and pick it up in the next part.